Hey guys, happy Sunday. So I am here with Josh Perry. Josh is a former professional athlete, a multiple brain tumor survivor, motivational speaker, and a keto expert. And so we wanted to come on and just talk to you guys about keto myths and how to get through the holidays and just answer any questions that you have when it comes to keto or ketones and just give you the facts. So I will let Josh introduce himself as well and we can get started.
So the word expert is really strong in my mind. I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert. I think I'm well versed in the basics and I'm very passionate about it. It's something that I believe has saved my life in many ways. And I love the science. I'm a nerd. I'm a high school dropout turned pro athlete, and now I'm really into the biology and the science around this stuff. So I think it's really fascinating. With that being said, yeah, it's a little introduction to who I am. And Jesse and I have similar perspectives of the ketogenic diet and supplement with exogenous ketones. But we have very different paths that led us to the ketogenic diet. Mine was an internal struggle with my health, mainly my brain tumors, TBIs, concussions, mental illness issues, things like that all centered around the brain function and performance, resilience, health. And Jesse, similarly, but also I believe you were sparked with, body composition as a primary goal that led you to learning about what is my favorite piece, the brain health benefits. So that's why we're just really passionate about having this conversation, sharing this conversation, what works for us, what we believe in, which education is one of the top, I think, for both of us, is really educating on why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing that, and the not right or wrong way, I don't believe in that, but the more beneficial way versus the more inefficient way. And so, yeah, I don't want to take over your life.
So one of the things that I want to reiterate with everybody on here is that I believe that any step in the right direction is a step in the right direction. So however you get to where you're going, I support. And I know everybody has to do it in different ways. It took me a long time to get to the point where I was ready to go all in.
3 to 4 years of being high fat, low carb, and 2 more brain tumor diagnoses to get full on keto and test my blood and all these things.
And yeah, and I mean, we all have, I started and stopped every single diet and every single thing I'd ever done in my life. And for the longest time, my endocrinologist had suggested keto for my PCOS for years. And I had said I could never do that. I could never do that. And it had to just take a breaking point for me. So anything that you're doing, however you're doing it, that's better than what you were doing the day before, I support, and I'm all here for you, but we also just want to educate you on how you can optimize your body and your brain. And if you want to get the kind of results internally, I use keto to manage PCOS and hormones and anxiety. And the way that I have been able to do that is I've eaten a very strict keto at times to get my metabolism to a point where I have more flexibility now. And I haven't been talking about that as much, and I just want to go over more of that with all you guys. So I wanted to answer some questions. I got a lot of questions yesterday about protein and macros, and I wanted to have Josh explain a little bit more in depth about that. So would you be okay with explaining the basics on macros and...
Yeah, so generally speaking, keto, ketosis, ketogenic, all these things referring to a state of ketosis, which is a metabolic state of producing ketones or ketone bodies in your bloodstream as a byproduct of burning fat, mobilizing and burning fat. And the way to do that is through many different mechanisms that all come together to create this state of ketosis. And when it comes to macros, generally speaking, it can range from, some people see results from 65% fat all the way to 95% fat, depending on if they're using it for epileptic seizures that are drug resistant, or if they've been low carb, they're a high intensity athlete, and their body just shifts to fat burning once they drop the carbs. So therefore, the second piece, which is probably the most important piece to start out with, is limiting your carbohydrate intake. To what threshold? That's going to be dependent on carbohydrate intolerance, insulin resistance, metabolic damage, genetics, age, gender, activity, all these things. So when we're talking about carbohydrates, generally speaking, you're going to be looking at a 5 to 10% carbohydrate intake. Again, that's generally speaking. There's not much context. It's very individualized. But then therefore comes, protein, and that's going to be anywhere from 10% at a low end for someone with epileptic seizures, sometimes 5%. I think 10 is like the lowest it'll actually go. Maybe sometimes they'll go lower, but up to 20-25%. Again, very generally speaking. So what I do when I give advice to a client, a friend, a family member, where I started, 75% fat, 20% protein, 5% carbs. But then the 5% carbs, again, that's still not enough context, because let's say someone like my girlfriend Jackie, who's had a lot of weight cuts for MMA and developed some eating disorders out of that. She damaged her metabolism really bad. We've tested this with a glucometer, blood glucose monitor, to see, and her glucose will spike 30 points higher than mine will, the same amount of food, meaning her mitochondria might be damaged a little bit differently than mine, and her body reacts different. So that 5% carbohydrate, which could be 30 total grams of carbs, for her, she may have to do 20 or less total grams of carbohydrates a day from non-starchy vegetables and no fruits, no sweeteners, things like that. So at the end of the day, you start out 75% fat, 20% protein, 5% total carbohydrates, and then you just tweak from there. But that's where blood testing comes in, testing your response to carbohydrates of all kinds, testing your blood after a couple of weeks of following this way of eating for ketone readings. And if you're not getting some ketone readings, that 5% carbohydrate limit may need to come down to 3 to 4%. Or Dr. Westman says, just 20 grams total carbohydrates a day for 2 weeks, you will be in a state of ketosis. And I know protein was another thing.
So I have a lot of questions. I got a lot of questions about protein. People are scared of protein, and it's also a really important thing that you guys understand that protein is not the enemy. I've shared pictures.
We need protein.
Yes.
Proteins are more than just muscle. They communicate on so many levels with our brain and other parts of our body. And,
there was a time that I didn't understand how to properly calculate macros, and I was losing a bunch of weight, but a lot of it was muscle, and that wasn't the aesthetic that I was going for. And so we also just wanted to address, that was one thing I really wanted to address tonight, is that protein isn't the enemy, and there's a difference between
carbohydrates aren't technically the enemy.
Yeah, carbs aren't the enemy
either.
Sugar,
that's a whole different story that I believe is an enemy to our health. But yeah.
But protein is extremely important, and hitting that protein goal is extremely. So one of the questions I got is, can too much protein kick you out of ketosis? And I wanted you to explain that when not going from a medical standpoint of epilepsy.
Well, something before we answer that is getting too little protein could be damaging to your gut. I know this has been coming up in conversations with people, with me personally lately, is like hair loss, especially in females. Not getting enough protein, people start to notice their hair falling out. Like that, there's a lot of things that I think are a lot of misconceptions in today's society about protein and like getting all buff and stuff. And it's like, no, don't be afraid of it. But then also this new word, gluconeogenesis, not a new word, but to the mainstream becoming this new word. And it's like fearful of kicking out of ketosis. And something interesting I learned at KetoCon with Mike Mutzel talking about is, I think it was Mike Mutzel. But anyways, gluconeogenesis is demand driven. It's not supply driven, meaning if you're in a high stressful state, if you're, releasing a lot of cortisol, or if you're working out a bunch, or if your macros are all these things, your caloric deficit, all these things, your protein is going to be needed to be burned for fuel because you're not getting enough fat in. Maybe your body is already tapping into its fat source and you're not eating carbohydrates. But if you're consuming a bunch of protein, it's not going to look at that first because it's an inefficient fuel source to be broken down for fuel. So that was one thing that stood out to me, is gluconeogenesis is demand driven, not supply driven. And so when it comes to people being afraid of eating too much protein, go back to the basics with Dr. Eric Westman, who's a keto specialist at Duke University here in North Carolina. Don't fear protein. Aim for fatty cuts of protein. Eat proteins liberating, and just pair it with fat, and just keep the carbs for him 20 grams total or less a day, and you don't have to worry about anything. So to fear protein, it's kind of counterintuitive to our health, but mainstream media and people talking about certain keywords that they learn about, it scares people. And I was scared about it for a while. That's why I was like really strict with protein being a very specific point for my body and my goals. But you want to, again, those macro ratios is where you want to start, but then you want to adjust based on how you feel, your blood. The ketogenic diet is amazing. It's the only diet with a biomarker. It's a ketone marker in your blood. It's beta hydroxybutyrate. No other diet has something like that to show you, hey, you're doing this correctly to reach this state that this diet provides. So again, when it comes to protein, subjectively, how are you feeling? How are your muscles feeling? If you're losing hair, that might be an indication you need to bump your protein up. Ryan Lowry had on his podcast, he had Vanessa, I forget her last name, I forget how to pronounce it, but ketogenic girl. But she was talking about like she was eating like 30 grams of protein a day when she first went keto, which is a significant low amount of protein. So
it's probably what I was getting when I was losing all that weight.
She had a lot of issues too, and then she
my hair was
to
falling
bump it
out.
up. So yeah, you don't want to fear protein. I mean, I'm not saying like you want to go pound 200 grams of protein a day if you're 100, 150 pound person. I myself, I'm 170 pounds and I consume anywhere from 100 to 130 grams of protein on any given day, which is 50 grams a day less than when I was like eating 150 grams of carbs a day and all these things to like fuel my workouts and my body composition, all these things. But as you adapt, that's another thing. Adaptation is huge. So when you start adapting to this way months down the road to years, your body, it gets really efficient with recycling different things and not blowing through fuel sources that aren't meant to be fuel sources. And one thing to know about gluconeogenesis is when you're really stressed out, you have a lot of cortisol coming through and adrenaline, it increases your glucose levels because it's tapping into your muscle tissue and or possibly the protein you're eating and breaking down those amino acids and turning them into sugar, which is gluconeogenesis is creating new sugar. So yeah, you don't have to fear protein. If your carbohydrates are low, don't fear the protein, just don't go crazy.
Yeah.
That was a rant, but
no, it's good. No, it's information. That's what we want to do here. Because I can give very basic explanations, but Josh can just give a much more in-depth explanation, which is.
And I'm just learning from Dr. Dom D'Agostino, Dr. Ryan Lowry, Jacob Wilson, all these great people, which they all have amazing resources. I mean, go read the Ketogenic Bible. Go check out Dr. Dom's website, ketonutrition.org, or any of his stuff. Prove It Keto 101 YouTube channel, Dr. Ryan Lowry's YouTube, like all these people. There's plenty of information out there, but
yeah, absolutely.
Not everyone, I guess, likes to go nerd out on it. So
it takes a while to get to that point. You have to be like losing your hair or something.
It's
to be
been
like
6 years for me in the making.
So I had a lot of questions, obviously, about the ketones, and I mean, everybody has a lot of questions about the ketones, but the basics of why take ketones if you make your own. So a lot of people said, these myths about, they can slow weight loss, or they just cause indefinite amounts of weight loss, and you can just take the ketones and not do anything else and just have this miraculous transformation. And I just wanted to clear up some things about those facts and why they're such a powerful tool, but just like any supplement, you have to still do work. And
so let's pick one of those.
Okay.
And we'll start there. What would be like the first one? Because you mentioned a lot of different pieces. I mean,
okay. What do you think would be the best place to start?
So you mentioned, in my mind, keto adaptation, metabolic flexibility, gaining weight with exogenous ketones, or exogenous ketones being like this miracle pill. So what do you think would be the most valuable to start with from your perspective? I mean,
So one of the biggest things that I get is the explanation of why take ketones if you already make your own.
Okay.
So let's start there.
So something I learned, no matter how strict I was, after years and months of being strict keto, my numbers weren't as high in terms of the millimolar per liter of like is it deciliter? One of the millimolars of ketones in my blood. No matter how strict I was, after some time, because there's a thing called keto adaptation. And not to get too into the weeds, but there's things called MCT transporters, not MCT oil. It stands for monocarboxylate transporters. They're basically like little tunnels from your bloodstream to your cells that shuffle ketones into the cells for fuel and lactic acid back out to be metabolized for energy, all these things. Over time, as you follow a ketogenic diet, your body starts to adapt and create more of these tunnels. They become more efficient, basically allow more traffic through them. And therefore, you're not having as many lingering ketones in your bloodstream because your cells are soaking them up and utilizing them, which is good. It's what we want. But for some people, like you, for example, you say, 1.3 to 1.5, 1.8-ish, you feel mentally best. My numbers, and Dr. Ryan Lowry always talks about this too, like we won't test, higher than 0.8 on any given day, no matter how strict we've been. Therefore, if your goal is mental clarity, mental, cognitive boosts or these things, or, our good friend Miles, controlling his seizures with a ketogenic diet, a state of ketosis, or someone like myself that, has brain tumors and we need to control insulin levels and all these things, you're going to want to supplement with exogenous ketones and follow a ketogenic diet the best you can. So that way you get the benefits of all these things, endogenous production of ketones, and then you supplement with the exogenous ketones, you get this system, this 24-hour system, and then you add in fasting, all these things as a natural byproduct of your hunger hormone ghrelin being suppressed. You get these amazing benefits that kind of work together in a synergistic manner. And so, and Brian here, coined the term make 'em take 'em, meaning make your own ketones endogenously, internally, and take ketones exogenously or externally. And you get, quick brain boosts of energy, and you get all the other effects of, the cell signaling, appetite suppression, which goes into the other things. It's, drinking ketones isn't going to be the driving force of why someone may be losing weight. Ketones, they signal brown adipose tissue, which helps burn fat more because all the mitochondria are so dense, and that's why it's brown. They also suppress your hunger hormone, therefore you're not going to eat as much calories in general, and that's going to allow your body to tap into its fat stores to make up for that deficit that you're not consuming. Following a low carbohydrate and or ketogenic diet at the same time, you're going to be burning through your stored carbohydrates in the body known as glycogen. And once that is chronically low, your body, your genes switch from sugar burning to fat burning, and it looks for that fat for fuel. And if you're already taking exogenous ketones, this goes into keto adaptation even more and metabolic flexibility eventually, but you're getting your brain the energy it needs while the muscles and the brain are kind of, playing this tug of war between ketones, because eventually the brain and the muscles understand the brain can only burn glucose or ketones, but the muscles can burn fatty acids, ketones, lactic acid at some points, I believe, and then ketones as well. So yeah, they can burn multiple sources, but the brain can only, very limited. So during this adaptation process, they're arguing over ketones. So if you're supplementing with them, especially at the beginning of a ketogenic journey, then you're going to be experiencing a lot more efficiency in your journey, and you're not going to feel any kind of signs of like the keto flu, which is, part of that adaptation, but ultimately it's also a deficit in sodium, which I know we're going on a tangent now. But the longer you focus on a high-fat, low-carbohydrate, ketogenic style of eating, and you're supplementing with exogenous ketones, and maybe you're fasting and you're exercising, you're burning through those glycogen, those stored carbohydrates, the months down the road to years that you do that, your body becomes really efficient at burning multiple sources of fuel, as well as if you start, implementing small doses of smart carbs later down the road. Once you're adapted, you met your goal, everything's good. When we say small amount, I mean no more than like 50 grams total a day. Things like sweet potatoes, berries, overindulging in nuts or nut butters, things like that, quinoa.
But yeah, I can have 50 carbs a day without issue. I can have 70 and stay in ketosis if I'm working out hard. Which
and there's so many variables to that too.
It's almost like too much information to like.
But at the end of the day, your main point was the ketogenic diet should be the primary focus of doing the work, but exogenous ketones are a supplement. They're a tool. And they're a daily tool for both of us. But the results we get, I mean, I didn't get into keto because of a weight loss, journey, but my body composition severely improved, and my strength improved as well. My endurance improved. That was before exogenous ketones ever came into my life. Now, with the science that's emerging and the subjective experiences that we've had, exogenous ketones are a must in my day, at least once a day. I don't get all upset if I don't have them that day. It's not like that, but it just makes sense with especially the epigenetic effects, especially for someone like myself with living with 4 brain tumors. So that's why we're passionate about the ketogenic diet and exogenous ketones.
And so I also wanted to, I've been getting a lot of questions about how we handle the holidays, how you handle, do you have a cheat day? Do you indulge? And what the consequences of that are. Like, how bad would it be a few weeks in if you had a full-blown cheat day? And I just want to go into a little bit about what happens to your body if you're just starting out and then constantly stopping, and the importance of sticking to it at first and putting in the work and being disciplined at first, and then getting the reward of having the metabolic flexibility after you put in the work with the discipline. And one of the things that I've said forever is discipline equals freedom. That's something that Josh always says as well. And it's so true. And so I know a lot of people are scared to jump in because it's like, oh my gosh, do you mean I could never have a piece of cake again? I could never have this. And because at this point you can't imagine your life without those things. But once you dive in and you put the work in, you'll have the flexibility to treat yourself now and then. But your mind will think of it differently. And I want to talk about holidays and, where you're at in your journey and the different ways that you can handle those things.
Something also is you're not going to want to cheat, because when we talk about cheat, majority of people are talking about processed sugary foods that are damaging regardless and aren't even real food. And when you get your brain and your body away from that for an amount of time, everything starts to change. Your taste buds change as well, and that stuff doesn't taste good. Now, sugar is always going to taste good. Like, our brains are just hardwired to, for that. But you're going to feel like garbage after. Your stomach may be torn up. You're going to get a headache, brain fog. You're going to get crashed, or you're going to crash later on. Like, all these things. So that's one piece of it. But then also there's options. Like, my birthday is on Wednesday, and Jackie just made us keto cheesecake yesterday for our little surprise dinner party we had, and that's delicious, and it's not going to be detrimental rather than going and getting a processed grain crust full of sugar and then the sugar added, the cream cheese and sugar toppings on, and like.
So I think that's one of the things about keto is learning the substitutes and learning how to adapt to make it work whenever you're craving things. Like, there's always something that can substitute. And then eventually you can get away from constantly substituting in the keto treats all the time as you get, into it, baby steps. So at first I utilized a lot of the keto junk. And not even the keto junk, but like I had a lot of the fat bombs and the extra sweeteners and stuff. And then as my taste buds changed, I wanted less and less of that. And now, like, if you put a real cupcake in front of me, I wouldn't eat it, which you don't understand, you guys. That used to be like what my diet consisted of. I ate pasta every single night. I ate pizza. I ate sweets. Like, I would make a cake every week. Like, that was my thing. And now it's just my body rejects that stuff and reacts to it so much that I just don't want it. And there's so many options. It's just putting a little extra effort in and looking for it. And once you understand, though, and once you start feeling good, it's hard to explain unless
you want to do things that make you feel good.
Yeah.
And something, too, to note is depending on your metabolic damage, depending on your journey with a low-carb ketogenic diet, a cheat or an indulgence, whatever you want to call it, a variance of the macronutrient plan, the state of ketosis, could mean 3 to 14 days after it takes your body to get back into fat burning. And Dr. Eric Westman always talks about that, because some people are like, I was 6 weeks in, doing great, and then I had this ice cream, and then, I plateaued, I stalled, and then, I was back on the plan for 4 weeks, and then I had another ice cream. And this was a interview he was doing. He was like, well, you did that over and over again? And she's like, yeah. I was like, well, that could be the problem, because your body is getting knocked out, and then it has to do all the work to bring it back because your metabolism is severely damaged, it seems. And that's why you're seeing that stall or that plateau, is because, and that could happen even if you're a little bit ignorant to tracking carbohydrates, or you're buying things with faith that the label is saying what it's saying, or it is what it's saying, and those carbs are creeping up, or there's ingredients that you weren't sure of that are actually sugars and all these things. So understanding that 3 to 14 days after an indulgence of any kind, depending on the individual, is how long it take your body to get back into fat burning. Now, metabolic flexibility, that takes some time. There's also context of exercise, genetics, age and damage to the mitochondria and all these things. But that's why we're really, advocates for following a low carb ketogenic diet the best you can. And you got to enjoy your life too. But to get to that point, you got to do the work, because of all the time before that, you weren't doing the work. And then we have this mentality of like, oh, it should happen sooner than later.
And I think keto, like, there's such a misconception of this instant gratification. And I go on these forums all the time and people are like, I didn't lose 20 pounds my first month. Something's wrong.
There's so much context to that too, because a lot of that is water weight from the glycogen stores being removed. It's not fat. Someone that loses 10 pounds of fat in about 2 weeks to 4 weeks, maybe 3 to 6 pounds of that, no, probably like 3 to 4 pounds of that would be fat. If that, it's a lot of water weight, and that's also why you got to replenish with electrolytes.
Yeah. So, I mean,
sorry to burst people's bubbles, but it's not fat.
Well, I think that's something that's so important to know, because when you're starting out and you have these expectations of like, okay, well, I want to fit into this dress. Why have I only lost 3 pounds in a month? It's not working. I'm done. And I think that those misconceptions can be super discouraging.
Well, even if the body is burning fat, water is replenishing the cell until the body finds homeostasis again and releases that water, and the fat cell shrinks. So it's still technically almost there. It's just replaced with something for time, and that's why you gotta stay consistent. That's why you have those keto. That's why you don't check the scale on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Like, you go off of how you feel, how your body's changing, visibly, and measurements, all these things. It's not just numbers. That's what almost killed me, actually. I talk about that. Being judged by the scale and what I looked like almost killed me. So that's my biased passion for avoiding the scale, but it's just something I like to share.
Well, I mean, no, I've talked about this before. I lost 30 pounds pretty quickly, but I did not look how I expected to look when I had lost that weight, because I didn't understand how long it takes to really heal your body and what it means to actually do keto. I hate to say even the right way, because I don't want to discourage anybody from jumping in, but if you want to really heal your body and have all the benefits of having a healed metabolism, resetting all those things that people complain about, PCOS, hormones, feeling like
brain fog, headaches, crashes,
like you are able to do that. And that's the other thing. Like, now I have freedom, and I know, I'll post that I go out, I have drinks, I indulge. I'm not always super strict with ingredients. I'm probably like 80%, but I also was really, really strict for a long period of time. And now that I've put
That's where exogenous ketones and supplements like berberine come in handy. Is once you've done the work, you've got to that point where you can mentally have one indulgence and not go off the rails. you can utilize these things and fasting and put yourself in a caloric deficit planned for that event moving forward or at the day after, without damaging your body, because now your body understands how it can burn fat, or it's already burning fat, and then you had that moment of indulgence, but you supplemented correctly, then you fast the next day, you did some movement, you did an exercise, whatever it may be. There's all these tools that can be implemented. It's just about doing them the right manner, the right time, and that's very contextualized to the individual.
And yeah, I think so.
That might be a good place to end it. We covered a lot.
I know. So if anybody has any questions, you can let us know. There's like not that many people on right now, but yeah, feel free to always reach out, and I'll always do my best to answer your questions. I try to be very upfront and transparent about everything. I know there's a lot of controversy around ketones and also a lot of misinformation, and what I am here to do and what Josh is here to do and what our passion is to educate people to feel like they can make these changes and understand how. So
yeah, I think that's good. We appreciate you guys. Yeah, I mean, we're here. My account's Josh Perry BMX. If you guys want to shoot me a DM, ask any questions, we'll probably do more of these. I mean, I know I'm putting out more educational style videos of the ketogenic diet, exogenous ketones. We'll get Jesse in there as well, doing some more. But yeah, I think it was good, and I just really just wanted to elaborate. There's no right or wrong. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, why you're trying to accomplish it, and the way you're trying to go. You don't have to be 100% grass-fed, organic, all this and that. At the end of the day, if you can get your blood sugar under control, more importantly, that's where it starts, is getting your blood sugar under control because of all the detrimental effects that come from that. And so whether that's, just getting whatever, just focus on your blood sugar and educate yourself.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys.